Uh, Before we start the story from last time, I want to address my Assyrian Church of the East brothers off of the last stream. Okay, so a few points were brought up regarding the anathemas of Gregory and why they would be acceptable. There is an assumption from my brothers in the Church of the East saying that Gregory was a Diophysite. There's no evidence for this. There is nowhere in the writings of Gregory where he says that Christ is in two natures after the union. Besides that, Severus of Antioch is a student of the Cappadocian Fathers, not in that he lived at the same time, but that his whole theology is based off of them. Besides that, just from their own writings, let me give you some quotes from Gregory. So here's one. This is in his second letter to Cladonius. He says, he was confident, he arose again, he ascended, belonged to the inner treasure, and then they accuse us of introducing two natures separate or conflicting and of dividing the supernatural and wondrous union. He says, for God and man are two natures, just as soul and body are. But there are not two sons or two gods, and no one's accusing the Church of the East of saying that there are two sons. Just as there are not two men in the latter case, even if Paul spoke in this way of that which is within a man and that which is outside him, and to put it concisely, there are indeed different constituents that make up the Savior, since the individual is not the same as the visible, nor the timeless, the same as that which is subject to time. Yet there is no difference of person, God forbid, for the two are one by being compounded. There is one composite from the two. That's what Gregory says. The Godhead having become man and the man having been deified, or however one might express it. And I say, different constituents, which is the opposite of what is the case as regards the Trinity, for there we acknowledge different persons so as not to confound the hypostases, but not different constituents, for the three are one and the same in Godhead. Okay. So, and many other quotes we have from Gregory showing that he wasn't a Diophysite. And like I said, there's nothing showing that he was a Diophysite. So for the Church of the East to say, we accept Gregory's anathemas because they're not in the context of Miaphysitism. No, this is not a good objection because it's the same words. So anathema 6, God the Word died in the flesh. That's anathema 12 of Cyril. And we already talked about the Theotokos one, which is anathema 1 for both Gregory and Cyril. Cyril's basing his anathemas off of Gregory. It doesn't make sense to accept one and not the other. The argument that Gregory doesn't mention Diodor's name, Cyril doesn't mention Nestorius' name in the 12 anathemas. Okay, if you are objecting to Gregory writing his anathemas against Diodor, there's scholarship saying that he wrote his anathemas against Diodor, like John Baer. But and again, no one's accusing the Church of the East of saying two sons, but let me read to you a quote from Theodore of Mopsuestia about Diodor. He says, this is Theodore of Mopsuestia, homilies 8:14 on the Incarnation 12. He says, Diodor's theory of two sons is naive. The distinction of natures does not prevent there being one son. So if this quote is authentic, which it seems like it is, Theodore is criticizing Diodor for implying that there are two sons. But even if we grant that Diodor isn't saying that there are two sons, which I've never claimed that the Church of the East is saying that, when you are talking about one, and then you talk about the other, and you talk about one doing something and the other doing something else, or the one saying something and the other saying something else, or there's some kind of relational association between them, and then, like Narsai says, he in this thing and he in another thing, as in two he's, or like, and Theodora of Cyrus, who's not canonized by the Church of the East, where he says, it is not the immortal, the one with the immortal nature who died, but the one with the mortal nature who died. So how many ones is that? That's two ones. Two ones is two. So that's two. Now, you want to say, okay, we don't mean two sons, we mean two natures, no problem. But my argument is not that you are saying two persons or two sons. My argument is this native to the Syriac tradition, or is this an innovation? And from everything I've seen, it is an innovation. It's an outside Nukhraya Greek influence into the Syriac tradition. More evidence of this. In the Pshitta, the Syriac Bible, Hebrews 2:9, it says, for by his grace, Taibuthe, God tasted death on behalf of everyone. This is the commentary, when Saint Ephraim writes his commentary on the verse, this is the version of the verse that he uses. We know that it existed in the Greek because Cyril uses it, not that it matters to the Church of the East, but just for there to be information on that. So Saint Ephraim uses this version of the verse. This is the current version that the Syriac Orthodox Pshitta uses. The Church of the East version says, Star min alaha, apart from God, he tasted death on behalf of all men. Why is there a discrepancy between the Syriac Orthodox version and the Church of the East version when it comes to this verse? According to Dr. Sebastian Brock in his article, Hebrews 2:9b, in the Syriac tradition, he says the Church of the East version, and this is this article I think is about 30 years old, or maybe more. He says that the Church of the East version was changed because of the influence of Theodore. When Theodore's theology influenced the Church of the East, they changed the verse to not be Theopaschite. Theodore didn't have a problem saying God the Word died, but only relationally. He didn't die according to his gnoma in the flesh. Okay? This is why we say in the liturgy, right after the epiclesis, we say, بإقنومه الخلاصي. I don't know in Syriac or English, but in English it doesn't matter because they can't even translate the word. I think they translate it as body or person. I don't know how they translate it. But the point is it's in this one knoma that he saved us. This one composite knoma. Also, this is why Abuna, when he takes the chains, he takes two chains and he says, holy is the one Son. From two chains he holds. Why is he holding two? Because of the two knome that become one. Okay. So this is showing again early Syriac tradition versus later Syriac tradition after Hellenic influence that happens later. Continuing on to the story. So I think we got to Chalcedon. We started the council. See how much I love you guys, Church of the East, is I gave you the whole first part of the thing just for you. And please watch the previous things because I exonerate you guys of like a lot of stuff that everybody accuses you of. St. Dioscoros, okay. All right, so I got to the part about he's there at the council, his friends switch sides, right? So as he's there, I told you guys the part, Theodoret walks in, he says to them, by what authority can he be here? They tell him by authority of the Pope of Rome. Okay, so continuing on in the story. While Dioscoros is still there, they talk about the concept of the natures, briefly, okay? So Dioscoros says, the Antiochian party says, he's in two natures, and whoever says one nature is an Apollinarian. And the Alexandrian bishops who come with Dioscoros, they say, we said it, and we always said it, and whoever doesn't say it is a heretic. So Dioscoros says, I can say from two. I can say from two, but not two. Okay? So the council says, are we going to listen to Dioscoros, or are we going to listen to Leo? And they say, Peter has spoken through Leo. So, and I don't know if you guys know, like the way councils work, they work in sessions. So like they go home, they come back. It's like a whole conference of many days. So this is not the trial of Dioscoros. Dioscoros' trial comes later. Now, in all of the trials of all the sessions, the only time the Roman legates preside over a trial is on Dioscoros' trial. The other times, it's not them. And in Dioscoros' trial, the fewest bishops came that were present at Chalcedon. It was like they knew this was a fishy thing and they didn't want to be associated. So Dioscoros, they summon him 3 times. He doesn't go. He says the soldiers weren't letting him leave the cell or whatever it is. So they depose him in absentia, like he refused the thrice summons, which actually, according to some scholars, was relieving for them. So it could be that, like هاي الطبخة اللي, like, we're going to not let him come, so we don't have to make a Christological thing here, okay? Because it was a break for them that they don't need to deal with the Christological thing. He just didn't come. Go ahead.
Who presided over the other sessions, like usually?
It was like the imperial side of it, like the Roman government.
So not like a church, like a pope, or a patriarch or something, or bishop?
No.
But that's not typically how it's done, yeah? Isn't it like...
Okay, so you have like the president of the whole council, of like from the beginning of it to the end of it, but you also have like sessions, and over these sessions, like different trials, there's certain people presiding. So like in the cases of the other trials, it was not, it wasn't bishops as far as I'm remembering. It was government officials, yeah. They were, don't get me wrong, there were bishops present at all of them. And we're gonna get into like the important ones. But for the one for Dioscoros, that was the only one that Rome actually presided over, and it had the fewest bishops there. So, and he wasn't present himself. Now, why do I say that they caught a break? They didn't have to make a decision on his Christology because they know that he was Orthodox. How can we say that they know he was Orthodox? If they currently today, they anathematize him as a heretic. So how do we know they knew he was Orthodox? Because they say explicitly in the minutes of Chalcedon, Dioscoros was not deposed for heresy, for he was Orthodox. He was deposed because he refused the thrice summons and because he excommunicated Leo of Rome. And obviously, this excommunication by Dioscoros was maybe a week before Chalcedon or so. He didn't. Leo had already excommunicated Dioscoros for 2 years earlier. Now, even though this is in the minutes of Chalcedon, do we have more evidence showing that the Chalcedonians didn't believe he was a heretic, Dioscoros? Yes, we do. In the 530s, Justinian the emperor sponsors these conversations between Constantinople, the Constantinople Chalcedonian bishops and the Syriac Orthodox bishops. And in these conversations, they admit again, and we have it documented, Dioscoros was Orthodox. So we know that they believed that. They changed their opinion centuries later, not even in 553. Even their 5th council doesn't say he's a heretic. Their 6th council does. So look how much time has to pass for them to say he's a heretic, because he wasn't a heretic. They couldn't say that he is until they changed their Christology. Then they were able to say that. But if they said he is, and he's just saying the same thing Cyril said, because remember, they're still in the same generation. 431 Ephesus, 451 Chalcedon is only 20 years. There's a lot of the same people still around. So then most of them remember what Cyril was saying. So Dioscoros is saying the same thing. They can't say he was a heretic. You see? Okay. So he's deposed. They have a trial for Theodoret and Ibas of Edessa, who we talked about. Theodoret of Cyrus and Ibas of Edessa. Which one do you guys want first? Ibas or Theodoret? Okay. So Theodoret, they bring him, and he's already restored, by the way, because remember what I said, by Leo. He's already restored, so the trial is just حتى يأخذهم على قد عقلهم, the Eastern bishops. They say, we need you to anathematize Nestorius. He said, oh, I've anathematized him before, and I anathematize anybody who, whatever. They said, no, we need you to do it right now, again. He's like, yeah, of course, anybody who's, no, say Nestorius. I anathematize Nestorius, even though he actually did do that. He did do that in 433, he did it. And he did it every time they asked him to do it. He sells them and buys them whenever he wants. So he did it. He said, okay, fine. I anathematized Nestorius. Okay. That's enough? You wrote 12 refutations against Cyril's anathemas. You congratulated everybody when Cyril died. You said you feel sorry for hell because they have to deal with Cyril now. But just because you said Nestorius is anathema, that's it? Look what else he said in his so-called repentance and trial. He says, I was Orthodox. I've always been Orthodox. My teachers are Orthodox. Who's his teacher? Theodore. He's saying, my teacher is Orthodox, and I'm Orthodox, I've always been Orthodox. What kind of repentance is this? Nestorius has a stronger case of repentance than Theodoret does. Because at least Nestorius said, after Chalcedon, that's what I was trying to say the whole time. The truth won, Nestorius is talking, anathema to Nestorius, he says, about himself. Anathema to Nestorius, that's fine. Look, nobody forced him. He said it freely. There was no pressure for him to say it. He said it freely, he just wanted his Christology. This is what I was saying the whole time. So, but with Nestorius, they say, no, he's a heretic. Why is he a heretic, but Theodoret is Orthodox? Not just Orthodox, they venerate Theodoret. They call him blessed. In their 7th Ecumenical Council, Nicaea 2, 787, they call him the blessed Theodoret.
When was Theodore excommunicated, or was he at that point?
Theodore of Mopsuestia?
Theodore, yeah.
Not by them, no.
It wasn't. So it's not a big deal that he said my teachers were Orthodox.
No, not to them.
For them,
Yeah, it wasn't. But it's very embarrassing for them because 553, they say Theodore was a heretic in 553. So here he's Orthodox, but there he's not. What happened? What happened now? So, okay. Any questions about Theodoret before I get to Ibas? I have a, these two guys, like, notice, the Chalcedonian side doesn't like to talk about them. But the Orthodox side loves talking about these two guys. Okay? So, Ibas, I told you guys about him before. Remember his letter? What did his letter say? He wrote a letter to the Catholicos of the Church of the East, the patriarch at the time, Mardadisho. And he told him that Cyril repented of his 12 anathemas. And in that letter, he said, he calls Cyril's 12 anathemas Apollinarian, and he also says, he calls Theodore of Mopsuestia the blessed interpreter. Okay? Now, the patriarch of Antioch at Chalcedon, his name was Maximus. Maximus of Antioch, he was the patriarch of Ibas. He says, according to this letter, not another one, this letter presented to us by his adversaries, by the enemies of Ibas. And they read the letter out loud, which was this one, so we know in the minutes. According to this letter, he is Orthodox.
Who said that?
The patriarch of Antioch. Yes.
So he's excommunicating Cyril in a way.
You can say it that way. Yeah, that's fine. So he says, according to this letter, he's Orthodox. And not just he said that. The others said it too. The other bishops there that were there said the same thing. So he was exonerated on account of this letter. Not despite this letter, not it was another letter, not he didn't write the letter. This letter that Ibas wrote to Dadisho shows he's Orthodox according to them. There's no debate about this. Anybody who argues this point is in denial, not in Egypt. Okay? So, now, remember I told you guys about Dominus II, the nephew of John of Antioch, who was patriarch of Antioch until Ephesus. Ephesus 449, deposed him and put Maximus in. Dominus is still alive during Chalcedon. So why does Maximus get the seat and Dominus doesn't get the seat? Did I tell you guys? بس انطوني راتبي. Okay. Zain. All right. So this is all happening. Juvenal, who switched sides, I told you about Juvenal of Jerusalem. There was a big fight at Chalcedon between him and Maximus over where the jurisdiction of Antioch stops and where the jurisdiction of Jerusalem begins. Also another embarrassing point. Now, by the end of the council, they're formulating the definition, the definition of faith of Chalcedon. This is why Marcion really wanted a definition of faith, because he wanted a new creed. Okay, so they're formulating this new creed. Originally, The Antiochian party doesn't want Theotokos in the creed, in the Chalcedonian creed. They lose this. Theotokos gets in. All right. And actually, before I say this other point, Cyril's third letter to Nestorius with the 12 anathemas was never read at Chalcedon. They never read the 12 anathemas at Chalcedon. Not just that. 553, the fifth council, it anathematizes the letter of Ibas and pretends that he didn't write it. It was a forgery, and they anathematize the letter, but not his person, because they don't want to contradict Chalcedon. They anathematized Theodoret's writings because they were against Cyril, but they don't anathematize his person because they don't want to contradict Chalcedon. Why didn't Chalcedon do those things? Why didn't Chalcedon, there at the moment in time, when these people are alive and sitting in front of you and you have the documents, why aren't you anathematizing them? Why didn't you do that? Like we did in 449. 449, look at these, heretical, gone, done, easy. Why doesn't Chalcedon do that? Why did they have to wait till 553 to do it? Why does Theodore of Mopsuestia, you need to wait till 553 to anathematize him? Why don't you do it in 451? It doesn't make sense.
Why did they hold that council 553?
It was a reconciliation attempt for us. Yeah. Obviously, we weren't there and we didn't care about it. It was, there's a lot of stuff wrong with that council too. Okay. So I said Cyril's anathemas were not read at Chalcedon. The letter of Ibas was read and approved as orthodox, saying that the 12 anathemas were Apollinarian and that Theodore of Mopsuestia is the blessed interpreter. So it canonizes Theodore, and then who they condemn in 553. Another thing for the Creed of Chalcedon, the definition of faith. Originally, it was going to say, from two natures. But because Dioscoros said it, they have to change it. Because Dioscoros said from two natures. If Dioscoros didn't say this sentence, at least Father Price says in his book, it could have been the creed of Chalcedon. But because Dioscoros said, I can accept from two, so they changed their creed to be unacceptable to Dioscoros. And they said into. Okay? In two natures after the union. Leo, in his writings, said on multiple occasions, don't listen to them when they tell you one incarnate nature after the union. And Cyril and Ephesus say, don't listen to them if they're telling you we don't mean two persons, we mean two natures. Don't listen to them. Two natures after the union. So who should we listen to? Like their question at Chalcedon, should we listen to Dioscoros or Leo? Okay, should we listen to Cyril or Leo? Ephesus or Leo?
Did they use the same terms of nature?
Good question. So Leo obviously was a Latin. So he wrote in Latin, spoke in Latin. And the Greek translation was probably done by Theodoret. He translated the tome into Greek. In any case, whatever the translation is, it's irrelevant in the sense of, are you saying that after the union, there are two particulars or not? The question of what is called Neo-Chalcedonianism, and we'll talk about that later, that's not an option on the table because that didn't exist in anybody's mind in this time. It's either he is one particular after the union from both, or he's two particulars after. Those are the only two options. So if they're saying phusis, if they're saying hypostasis, the context is clear. Like Theodoret and Flavian, he probably was influenced by Flavian of Constantinople, who we talked about from the 448 Council, on formulating it this way. He translates it to one hypostasis and two phusis, which has never been used before. Flavian might have used it, and Theodoret. And like the Greek version of the tome, at least. That's it. There's nothing in history that uses this formula. Nobody. Okay, any questions about Chalcedon before we keep going in the story? Dioscoros gets deposed and sent into exile. The Alexandrian Synod of Bishops refuses to sign. They say, we can't sign because if we sign and we go back, they're going to kill us. So let us go home, pick a patriarch, and then we can sign. They went back home, they picked the patriarch who was Timothy, and Timothy II, and then they never signed. But if they said that they're not going to sign, they were going to arrest them and depose them. They were smart about it.
In that case, did they raise objections to the deposition of Cyril? Did they get the minutes in the actual council?
They asked for the anathemas to be read multiple times, the 12 anathemas. They weren't read. Yeah, there was a bishop who says, look, to be fair, some of the bishops who did accept Chalcedon were obviously confused. Like they didn't really, you could tell they weren't understanding what was going on or what the dispute is, because they were saying things like, can we just make sure everybody isn't thinking that we mean two natures after the union? Somebody said that, one of the bishops who accepted. I think it was Eustathius of Beirut or Basil or something. I can't remember which one. And then the same one, he says, and if I'm wrong, throw me and Cyril out together. So clearly some of them were ala niyatum, okay?
Were some complicit?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. Huh?
Like from Alexandria? The Synod of-
Oh, some, like a minority, like less than a handful of the bishops of Alexandria switched sides. I think maybe 4. Yeah, it was a small number. The majority didn't. So Barsoma, look, they accused us at Chalcedon of killing Flavian, which I already went over we didn't do, right? And they couldn't make up their mind who did it. They were accusing Dioscoros sometimes Barsoma and his monks, sometimes I don't know who. Barsoma comes into the council at Chalcedon. He yells at everybody in Syriac, and then he leaves. Because he's not a bishop, right? But because of him and because of the Syriac order of which Barsoma was, Chalcedon made a new rule for the monks, conforming monasticism. Before, it wasn't as centralized. But in order to control it, so they made rules regarding monasticism there. A lot of the monks, like Simeon, Saint Simeon al-Amudi, right? He would be on a pillar. He didn't accept Chalcedon. He refused to accept it. Simeon. So the emperor came himself and told Simeon, can you please come down off the pillar? And the stylite monks, the monks of the pillars, they didn't accept Chalcedon. So them coming down would be an acceptance because of this centralism of monasticism they were doing. So that'd be a symbolic acceptance of Chalcedon, so they refused to come down. Now, there was a province called Illyria. It is now where Yugoslavia is, like Croatia and these areas. I don't know if you're familiar, the Balkans. They say something very interesting at the end of the council. Once they read the tome, after they read the tome, they hear the tome, they say, "What have we done? Bring back Dioscoros, bring back the fathers." That's what they say in Chalcedon. There is evidence, according to Dr. Sebastian Brock, according to Father Price, Chalcedonian scholars even, Price is one of them. Brock was one when he wrote this, that the minutes of Chalcedon were tampered with to hide the fact that the letter of Ibas was used as proof of his orthodoxy and the basis on which he was exonerated. Obviously, they weren't able to hide it all because it's still there. We can still see it and clearly see that that's what happened, but there was even more showing that previously. You can't read a letter in front of somebody, he hears it and says, "That's not mine." He didn't say. Not only did he not say that's not mine, they said, "Oh, this proves that he's Orthodox." Anyway, any questions about Chalcedon? So whenever councils happen in the empire, they become the legal law, the policy of the empire. So Chalcedon becomes policy. Dioscoros sent into exile. They send a patriarch who they think is a patriarch to Egypt. The Chalcedonians send one to Egypt. What do you think the Egyptians do? Okay. And by the way, today's feast day of Saint Dioscoros. May his prayers be with us. So it's funny we're laughing about it. Anyway, so they're not able to take hold in Egypt at all for a century. Even then, like even a century later, they just have a titular guy there. It's not even like they never really have Egypt as a bastion for them at any time. With Jerusalem, I think I told you guys, Juvenal, he told his people, "If I accept it, don't let me come back." And then he went back accepting it, and they kicked him out. And then he had to come back with the army. All of these sees, within 20 years of Chalcedon, within 20 years of it, they all become non-Chalcedonian. So by the late 460s, by the late 460s, and earlier in some cases, like in Jerusalem, as early as 459. 459, they had Anastasius of Jerusalem, he rejected Chalcedon. 468, Peter the Fuller of Antioch, because he becomes patriarch of Antioch, he rejects Chalcedon. This is the first time in this whole controversy, so from the early 5th century, from the John of Antioch days and before, that there is a Miaphysite patriarch of Antioch. It's Peter in 468. So now you see a switch in the alliances, where it used to be Rome and Alexandria versus Constantinople and Antioch. Now Antioch is in communion with Alexandria in 468. When were they in communion before? Many times, formula for union, or before even this controversy throughout church. But during the Diophysite-Miaphysite controversy, there were opposing Christologies up until 468. 468 is when it becomes permanent. Antioch, from 468 until now, Antioch and Alexandria have remained in communion. So, and Constantinople has a patriarch named Acacius of Constantinople. Acacius goes into communion also with Alexandria and Antioch. So all the East, there are consecutive emperors in the East who are not Chalcedonian. Basilicus, I think, is one. Zeno, Anastasius. So Zeno, he does a formula. It's called the Henoticon. Okay? The Henoticon, it says, it anathematizes Apollinarius, Eutyches, Nestorius, Arius, Theodoret, Ibas, anathematizes them. It says Christ is one, he's not two, and whoever says he's two, it says even if it were at Chalcedon, let him be anathema. And the whole East accepts this. Rome is not in the picture. Rome excommunicates everybody in the East again. So, sorry, let me change the slides. Okay. I skipped this. I shouldn't have skipped it. So 475, the Third Council of Ephesus. The Third Council of Ephesus is the reunion before the Henoticon. Okay? In the Third Council of Ephesus, Leo and his tome are anathematized. Eutyches is anathematized. They reverse a lot of the ecclesiastical decisions that Chalcedon did, like Jerusalem's autocephaly or Constantinople being its own thing apart from Ephesus, or these kinds of things, okay? It reverses a lot of that. So by 484, when the Henoticon is there, it's already set up for it because of this council, Third Ephesus. Third Ephesus was presided over by Timothy of Alexandria and Peter of Antioch. Okay? Any questions about this? No.
Just for the Henoticon?
This is before. This is maybe a decade before.
Okay, just to change and
To reverse.
to reverse what
Yeah.
Chalcedon.
Yeah. I wouldn't say to clarify, because they're not recognizing Chalcedonians. To clarify what orthodoxy is. Now, this council is important for other reasons too. It's this council that puts the creed into the liturgy for the first time in history. The creeds previously, the creed was done during baptism. This council puts the creed in the liturgy itself.
So,
It uses the creed of Constantinople 381. So now 381 becomes ecumenical. Okay?
is it Peter the Fuller who puts the crucified for us? Again, or no?
Yeah, there's different opinions. So there's obviously like the tradition of Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus by the cross. There's also Eustathius of Antioch, but we don't have proof for this. The closest I've seen is Ephraim the Syrian himself, when he makes Trisagion references in his poetry, he uses them Christologically and says that. Or the most explicit is Rabula of Edessa. He uses it explicitly.
It's crucified for us? So it's there before.
Yeah. Now, so when Peter the Fuller,
So what did he do on this? For this
Peter?
thing? For this crucified, for this Trisagion?
what did Peter do?
He emphasized this part, like what?
You're asking me what Peter did.
Yeah, for this.
He put it in the liturgy
The Trisagion.
because it's a hymn. The Trisagion's a hymn. So he puts it in the liturgy. Okay? So now, it wasn't controversial. Here's again another anachronism revisionist thing that they're doing. It was not controversial that the hymn is Christological. Everyone always understood the hymn to be Christological. Why are you calling the Holy Spirit immortal? Who's arguing that the Holy Spirit is immortal? Everyone knows that. But it's because you're emphasizing the immortality of the Son. Every time the Trisagion is mentioned in the scriptures, it's regarding the second person of the Trinity. The Syriac tradition, Revelation is not canonical for us, but for the Greeks it is, for Severus it is. When they're saying the Trisagion in Revelation, they're saying it to the Lamb who was slain. If there was a problem with the Trisagion being Christological versus triadological, we would have heard about it in that time. Someone would have wrote on their side, they would have said, why are you making this a Christological hymn? It's about the Trinity. Nobody says that. But they're saying, until John of Damascus. John of Damascus, later he says it. Huh?
Way later.
Yeah, way later. Before this, when the time this is happening at this time, that's not what's going on. That's not the conversation. The conversation is holy, almighty, immortal God crucified for us, or is it just the man? That's the question. That's the argument that's happening in that time. Okay? So when Peter adds this clause, if he adds it, or adds the Trisagion in the liturgy, the controversy is not it's not about Christology versus triadology. It's about if this one pneuma is the one who suffered. Okay. I'm going to get back to this because it's important about the Trisagion thing. We'll talk about it more. But I'll probably bring it back in another lesson, because when the Antiochian when there's going to be a split line, we're going to talk about it again. My brothers, the ones I love the most of the others, those on the outside. In 484, it says 482, but I think it was 484. One of those years. The Catholicos of the Church of the East, Bawe, or sometimes it's Babawe. It's a soft B there, so it's pronounced both ways. He was in communion with Peter, and he's venerated by us, by the Syriac Orthodox Church. He's on the calendar. Okay, the Church of the East also has a saint named Barsoma. I talked to you guys about him. Their Barsoma instigated the king of Persia to kill Marbawe, and they had a synod in 484 and then another one in 486, and they made a cautious of Ctesiphon, Akak, the patriarch. Peter of Antioch broke communion with them. Until now, the communion's broken from this. So in reaction, Antioch breaks communion, and Antioch closes the school of Edessa. As you can see here, Cyrus II of Edessa convinces the Emperor Zeno to close the school. Okay? And there became a completely different shift, like a coup, if you will. Like I think I mentioned this before. Like the books in the schools were changed from Ephraim to Theodore. So now the Church of the East goes on to have its own synods, its own life, completely separated from what's going on in the Roman Empire. And in their synods coming up in the next century. We're not going to go over them because now they're going to be separate from us. But they have synods explicitly condemning theopascatism, saying that God, the Word, suffered for us, these kinds of things. And anathematizing people like Cyril and Severus in the following centuries. Okay. Right now, today, Mar Dincha removed the anathemas, and the hymns have been changed in the Church of the East, so that where Cyril and Severus's names used to be, have been removed from those hymns. Some of the old books would still have them. But notice what the Church of the East does. They're very honest, very, very honest. They always pair Cyril and Severus together. Why? They don't pair Cyril with John of Damascus or with Maximus or with any of with Leo. They're pairing Cyril with Severus. Why are they pairing them?
They know they have the same opinion.
Exactly. Whenever the Chalcedonians, who are a lot further from us than the Church of the East, a lot further, in every sense, every imaginable sense. Let me go over the senses in which they're way further. They're further from us in terminology. They don't use the same definitions of terms. They're further from us in understanding a hypostatic union at all. Us in the Church of the East are recognizing a union of hypostases. The Chalcedonians don't do that. They're closer to us in tradition of rite. They're closer to us in having diversity in their rituals and rites. They're closer to us in not having, in ecclesiology, in having the way their synod, their patriarch, and their bishops are set up, not like a papacy, or not like everybody has the same Byzantine liturgy.
But they're one church, or I guess maybe when they had like bigger presence in the East, they were more diversified. Is that what you're saying?
No, not necessarily, but that's irrelevant because what my point is, just like us with the Indians are doing the Syriac rite. Yeah? The Church of the East has the same thing going on. But my point is, they're not expecting everyone else to drop their rights to become them.
They don't have, who else do they have?
Let's say the Church of Cyprus wants to join the Church of the East, for example. The Greek Orthodox Church of Cyprus wants to join the Church of the East. They can stay using the Greek rite. They don't have to now Syriacize.
It's a hypothetical point because they're not joining. Nobody, like who is...
You're asking me a hypothetical question.
But you're saying they're diversified, but how do you know?
Because in communion, in the ecumenical dialogue, when you're talking about it, what are you expecting and what are we expecting? That's how we know. Yeah.
So, one more question. The EO, or just Chalcedonians, they don't believe in hypostatic union?
No. They believe there's a simple, not composite, simple, divine only hypostasis.
Is that neo?
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly. It's this way of thinking begins in the late 6th century, which we're not there yet.
And it's across Rome and Eastern Rite.
Look, to be fair to them, to their side, I have met some few minority of proto-Chalcedonians. And when I'm saying this, I don't count the Chaldeans, because the Chaldeans have the Church of the East Christology. They're an exception. Everybody else, the minority of Chalcedonians have Proto-Chalcedonian Christology, which would be Church of the East. But the majority of them do not. Okay? What was I saying though, before you asked me in what sense? Before you asked me the question about the Church of the East.
You're saying they haven't found more than Chalcedonian in tradition and in language.
Yeah. But that was an answer to his question. It's okay. Anyways, that's fine. I'll watch the video after and then I'm going to remember what I wanted to say. Okay, so in Alexandria, by the time of the Henoticon, Peter Mongus becomes patriarch of Alexandria, and Peter the Fuller in Antioch, Acacius of Constantinople. They all on the same page. They all accept the Henoticon. Rome excommunicates everybody. Okay. How much time do we have?
4 minutes, 4.5 minutes.
Okay. So in the Henoticon, what the situation is that the East is non-Chalcedonian again. So 449, 2 years, and then Chalcedon happens, and then very shortly after, like within some cases 8 years, some cases 18 years, within very shortly after, the whole East drops Chalcedon. So now we're at what the West calls the Acacian Schism. In the Henoticon document, there's two versions. There's the Eastern Chalcedonian version of the document, and then there's the original Orthodox version. So in the Eastern Chalcedonian version, they add a paragraph at the end, or a sentence at the end. And they say, after this document, the Egyptians returned to the Catholic Church, as if they were out of the Catholic Church, this is a later addition to the document. The original document doesn't say this sentence, because we've, like those of us who didn't accept Chalcedon have always been the Catholic Church. So anybody who accepted the document came back to us, right? Okay. So now, in this time, you're still at a time of single lines, single patriarchal lines. There's not parallels yet. There are some like leanings here and there. Some people are maybe quiet on some things or tolerating of some things. Like you'll have people wanting to be in communion with Rome or not. Like Macedonius of Constantinople, he was a Chalcedonian, but it was the Henoticon era. So what do? You just break communion with that bishop. So that bishop becomes excommunicated, even if he joins Rome or doesn't anathematize Chalcedon or whatever it is. So then eventually though, because it's kind of a weak union, like the formula for union was in 433, it's going to come to a head and then it's going to implode, right? And then that's what happens in 518. 518, this is what happens. In 512, Severus becomes Patriarch of Antioch, okay? The patriarch before him, Flavian II, was deposed. Why? Because he didn't condemn Chalcedon strong enough. He condemned Chalcedon. He said anathema to Chalcedon, but it wasn't strong enough, they said. He is currently venerated today in the Chalcedonian churches because he condemned Chalcedon, but not strong enough. And then the rest of the minutes could be questions. We'll get into Severus's patriarchate in the next time.
So I have a question about like Rome. So throughout the history, since Leo, basically, they kind of stuck to their diaphysitism. When it comes to Constantinople, they had reversions at some point. Why?
Why what?
Why did they never not have like popes or bishops, or did they have some points where they wanted to go back to the faith of Cyril or Saint Cyril or
Good question. Okay. In 497, there's a letter from the Church of Alexandria to the Church of Rome, telling them, by the way, using complete respect, honorifics, everything. And the schism had already happened since 451, you know? So they're telling Rome, it could be that the tome of Leo was mistranslated. It could be that the enemies of the church, Theodoret, they mention him as the enemies, one of the enemies of the church, mistranslated the letter on purpose. So let's talk. Maybe we'll understand each other. And they say, and just in case, we're going to keep a copy of this letter here, because when Jesus comes back, we have to show him that we were struggling for the unity of the churches. This has always been our approach and spirit. We want unity because we are the church, not because we're weak. And even if we're weak, he makes us strong. When he came as a humble carpenter. What is Oriental Orthodoxy? Is Oriental Orthodoxy the church of the emperor, or is Oriental Orthodoxy the church of Western Europe and Western civilization? Or is the church of the carpenters and the shepherds and the Bedou this is us. And we're still here after all the persecution. We didn't even talk about the persecution in this time. And we'll talk about it more coming up. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. But what is Rome like? Did they have moments where they want to come? Like one where they wanted to give up their
Yes.
life citizenship?
Yes.
That's the question.
There were moments. Yeah. So there would be a candidate.
The patriarchs.
There would There would be a candidate for the papacy who was ready to sign. And as soon as he becomes pope, he changes his mind.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
If he lose anything, if he changes his mind, why he's scared to step this step?
So they will tell you reasons like, well, there was some accident that prevented it, or there was some miraculous thing that, because the papacy is infallible, so he couldn't do it because God prevented it from happening. This is the reasons they give. You know, sometimes when stuff happens, like I'm driving to the church to get baptized and I get in an accident. It doesn't mean God doesn't want me to get baptized. It means the devil doesn't want me to get baptized. That's why I got in the accident. Yeah. Okay.